Welcome to another edition of the Corner Booth Podcast here from the Stoughton Deli. I'm Aaron Rand from CJD, along with Bill Brownstein of the Montreal Gazette, and I'm pretty sure this is Terry DiMonte behind the cup of coffee. How you doing?
That's me. Hi, Aaron.
We're reuniting the gripes.
Already laughing.
Indeed we are.
7 years later. Which
8 years.
I'm sorry, 8 years later.
8 years later.
For those of you who may remember, the Gripes of the Round Table, we were on with Mitsumi Takahashi on CTV every Friday afternoon. And what killed that, Bill?
COVID.
What a surprise.
And then they said, here's your coat, what's your hurry, get out of the building.
There you go.
Don't darken our...
Don't come back.
Don't come back.
Well, Terry's been with us once before, actually a couple of times.
I think so, yeah.
First coming back from BC, where you moved after CHOM. So we thought this seemed like a perfect opportunity for the Gripes to reunite, because typically we talk about stuff going on in the city. We're all native Montrealers. I'm including you in that group.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And we like to talk about what's going on in the city, and clearly there's a lot to talk about. I know, let's just start with something really generic like, traffic,
And
roads,
ironically...
bike paths. Can we go there, Bill? Is that
Yes,
a good
we
place
could.
to start?
I mean, but ironically, the gripes began, and that was our major gripe that listeners all chimed in on, saying this is what was... And if anything, and we thought the situation was a bit dire back then, it is out of control now.
No, I'm pretty sure it was out of control then.
No, but it's more out of control.
Is it?
Oh, God, yeah.
Well, Terry, you had a chance to move away and come back, and you've noticed, I guess, a really significant change in how better things have gotten here. Right?
Oh, yeah. It's marvelous. So marvelous that we chose not to live in the city. So I want to start by giving a bit of a caveat. I don't have a dog in the fight because I live in the Laurentians now. But the reason I live in the Laurentians, Jess and I chose to live up there, is because of the chaos that not only doesn't seem to get better, it seems to get worse. And I've said this before publicly. Anytime you talk about this, people yell, you stupid old boomer, you don't understand change, blah, 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 blah. I don't think it's about any of that. I think it's about civic responsibility versus ideology. And I think that not just the mayor, but a lot of other governments, not just in Quebec, but across the country, have taken to managing civic affairs, or they've abandoned civic affairs in place of ideological ideals. I never thought it was the purview of the mayor to save the planet. So I always thought the purview of the mayor, not that there's anything wrong with saving the planet, but I always thought the purview of the mayor was to, be the mayor, and be the mayor for all citizens of the city.
Not just the ones who ride bikes.
Silly.
Yeah,
You see,
silly me.
Way back when, you'll recall, you were still in town, you were still on the radio, there was a huge public consultation. Should we close Camille Hood to traffic, or should we not? Overwhelmingly, our citizenry said, no, don't close it. Because
if you live in Montreal...
But the point being that she went ahead anyway.
Right.
Said,
if you live in Montreal, I think it was Josh Freed in the paper said it was a solution in search of a problem. If you live in Montreal, and I've been over the mountain a bunch of times since I've come home, and there's lots of people walking, there's lots of horses riding, there's lots of bicycles biking, no one's dying, there's no, imminent danger, there's not hot lava coming off the mountain. Like it isn't necessary, and the reverse is true, I think. It's a necessary thoroughfare for Canada's second largest city. This is the thing about this administration. They've managed the city for a small corner of the city, and I think, in my opinion, tried to apply those things that they've done in places like the Plateau, Mile End, etc. They've tried to run that corner of the city for those residents and keep only those residents in mind when they make these decisions. I was trying to get to Saint Denis a couple of days ago along St. Urbain. And I don't know if you've been down St. Urbain yet, but the full two lanes of the side of the road is closed. And it looks to me like they're putting up those bumps that they're so fond of. You know, the new
Speed bumps.
Well, they're not speed bumps. They're the cement abutments up against the bike lane.
Yeah, they're doing a protected bike lane. That's what that is on that street, but also adding a lane for buses. So cars will be basically on that north-south thoroughfare down to one lane.
And the thing is, I understand, like, cars, bad, smoke, climb, blah, 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 blah. But the reality is, Montreal is an urban center. It's the economic capital of Quebec. Cities are supposed to look like cities. And the people that are pursuing the path to making it look like Amsterdam are not keeping a lot of things in mind. And I think it makes bad economic sense, and it isn't good for the citizenry unless you go everywhere by bike or bus.
But it was announced recently, which is really interesting, that Dr. Penfield, only 8 years it's going to be under construction, which means then the Projet Montreal said, well, maybe we'll walk this back a bit and there'll be room for a bus to go up, but no cars. You know what? And there's going to be construction on Côte St. Catherine. All the alternate routes, like if the mountain is
Look, that all goes back to, with respect to that and what you're mentioning. We found out just a week ago, the Auditor General's report for the City of Montreal. If you look at that as a scorecard for how an administration is doing, it's X's all the way down, right? It's the fact that, and to Bill's point, you're going to close Dr. Penfield for 8 years. Okay, it sounds ludicrous, but there's an aqueduct there. I understand there's major work to be done. And I mentioned this to a friend who's a downtown merchant who said, what are the 8 years? He said, they put up a building in Dubai in 2 weeks. And he said, what, do they have one person working on this construction project? Is that what has to take 8 years? But the bottom line is, where was the planning? Where is the coordination? That's a word that I don't even think exists, because you and I used to I still live in Griffintown. It is impossible to go from one street to the next without either being a detour or a roadblock or a turn back, go the other way. We all understand work has to get done. How about if you actually let the population know that work is about to be done, so you can plan a route that doesn't frustrate you every single day? That's what's lacking.
A lot of times when they do these things, pardon me, they do them without thinking about what's the alternative route. Where can we go?
That's what I'm saying.
If you can't, it's the old, I can't get here from there. I was visiting my friends at the Mersons yesterday. They've been at the corner of St. Jacques and Cavendish for over 50 years. And in the last 12, I don't know how many times St. Jacques has been dug up. And during the big redoing of the Turcotte interchange, St. Jacques was closed for a very long time, and the businesses managed to hang on. Now it's being dug up again. And I get it. The pipes are old, lead pipes, et cetera, et cetera. But where was that discussion, to your point, when we're going to do 4 years of the Turcotte interchange, tearing everything up, and you'll see afterwards everything will be great. Well, it didn't turn out that way. So it's lack of planning. I think lack of planning and a lack of concern for the well-being of the citizens, and making sure that Montreal is what it's supposed to be, which is one of Canada's biggest major
centers. And let's call a spade a spade. With respect to, at least to this administration, they don't like cars. I think they've made that pretty plain. But I point out, and I always bring this up because you think when you have a government, beyond what they have to get done from day to day, they have a plan for the future, right? You're not just in power for 4 years. You're supposed to be governing as if you're going to be there for a while. So if you look simply at numbers, there are now 30% more cars on our road than there were 10 years ago. How was someone not able to sit down and go, wait a sec, if this is what we're seeing, and it didn't happen in 1 day or in 1 month, it's been gradual, right? There are simply more cars on the road. There's more traffic on the road. You'd think at that point an administration would go, well, look, we need to accommodate more cars. What can we do to make it easier for people who use their cars? Not just to go to the store, to go to work, they carpool, whatever. How do we make that easier? And they have done none of that. What they've done is said, how do we make it easier for people to get out of their cars and ride their bikes where they have to go? And that's where we are.
And what I really don't like about the administration is there's a tone of condescension to them. There's a tone of patting you on the head like, oh yeah, you just don't understand. Cities are all moving this way. Well, are they? Have you been to Chicago or Seattle or any of these other places. And I got nothing against the implementation of bike paths. For example, the one on de Maisonneuve. It has lights, it has cement protection. It's, they took away the parking, but people got used to that. But it's never, you build that bike path, and as you and I have talked about before over these last 8 years, you build that really nice bike path on de Maisonneuve, and then you have to dodge cyclists on Sherbrooke who are zigzagging in and out of traffic. So it shouldn't be a cars versus bikes thing. It's how do we make this city work better for everybody?
But the big irony...
That's what the city says,
that's what
but
the
not
city
what
says.
the city
but
does.
The big irony in all of this is that the projet, for example, is very conscious of air quality, and as they should be, and as everybody is.
Nobody
and what do you think is going to happen when they close down like the Mountain Road, when they closed it like with Penfield? You are going to have the sort of gridlock, people be dying in your cars, like in terms of all the pollution intake, and that's what is lost in all of this thinking.
And to Aaron's point, there's I even notice it. I've said this before. I remember when I was still working, the DeCarry had like a window. The DeCarry, when it opened, it was called an expressway. That has been the case for a long time.
Oxymoron.
But, when the DeCarry, when I worked until 10 a.m., there was a window on DeCarry, usually between like 10 and 1:32, where you could just drive up and down it, right? And those days are gone.
Terry, looking back on those days, when there wasn't traffic 24/7 on DeCarry.
Like there was a window of opportunity, and I'm saying that's an example of your stat, that there's lots more cars on the road, lots more people living here. How do we manage that? And you don't manage that, I don't think, by closing St. Urban and putting little cement blocks all the way up the street. That's ideological. That's something that they want to show.
But oddly enough, it's become contagious. The city does not have a monopoly on. If you go through Westmount, of all places, it's like insane. I think they finally fixed up Sherbrooke, and Grosvenor, and Victoria, Green Avenue, Wood Avenue, St. Catherine.
I have to
everywhere.
give them credit. There's a sign up on Victoria Park. There's a gym in there that I go to. And there was a sign up when I went to the gym on Wednesday, and it was a sign from May, and it said the work will be completed August 25th, and it's completed. It was, to my shock and amazement, the work on Sherbrooke and in the Sherbrooke Victoria area is done, and it was done on time.
The Corner Booth podcast is brought to you in part by the Snowden Delicatessen, where we are. 75 years in business, the hub of Montreal's greatest smoked meat, plus Carnotzel, potato latkes, and the famous Snowden Deli party sandwiches. That's the Snowden Delicatessen. I want to point out one thing, and you talked about this, we talked about this a long time ago. Part of what really bothers me now is the idea that the city has decided that, yes, bikes will take priority. We also know, by the way, that the city spent, depending on what numbers you believe, somewhere between $500 and $800 million on bike paths. We also found out in the Auditor General's report, they cut $100 million out of their road work budget.
Right.
So that tells you pretty much everything you need to know. But it's this idea that you could make a bike path wider, and you need one apparently on both sides of the street. It's not enough to have a bike path just on one side. You need them on both. So you narrow traffic down to a single lane. And nobody, not a single genius in the administration thought, hey, what happens when they pick up garbage on the street?
Right. Yeah.
Or when there's
Big
a
deliveries.
delivery on the street? Or when a fire engine has to get down the street? Then what happens?
Yeah.
Nobody took that into account. So to your point, I remember you said this, and I thought it was such a great description. They've made the sidewalk, and I'm speaking in Griffintown now, as wide as Italian piazzas for absolutely no reason.
No. Again, I think that's this obsession with doing things that they've seen in other places that they think is pleasing to the eye or whatever it is. And it's not just that; it's like bollards everywhere. They put up. Like I was on DeCarry a couple of days ago, and there was a fire engine trying to turn onto DeCarry, and I'm talking DeCarry between Sherbrooke and Monkland. And I forget what the corner was, but the fire truck was, it had sirens going and the lights were on, and he was trying to make the turn, and he had to back up
To be able to get
because of the bollards. And to carry between Sherbrooke and Monkland, I think the speed limit is 30. It's not a speedway. Who said let's get those up? Who's decided that?
By the way,
what
that's
we
going to
have-
get a lot better because now they've announced construction beginning next week that's going to last a year and a half on Côte Saint-Luc Road for the overpass on the Décarie Expressway,
Look.
which is going to curb traffic on the expressway. So the fire trucks
There are
will-
44 road projects planned for the city this fall. 44, all over, from the 20 to 40 and everywhere else. I started by saying, hey, let's start with roads. Well, we've done nothing but talk about roads and
Yeah.
traffic and bikes. So let's kind of move on from there and talk about something else
Right.
with respect to the city. You brought up Camellia Wood.
Yeah, that I just want to quickly say what enrages me about that is when the mayor stands in front of a microphone and pretends that there wasn't a study done and there wasn't a conclusion
and a public consultation.
and a public consultation. And there's such an arrogance about that. There's such a, you know what, we're going to do it anyway because I'm leaving office and to hell with you all. That is the kind of thing that politicians do that enrage me. They think they're fooling me. And, you know, they're not, she's not fooling anybody. It isn't, I don't think the majority of people, how many people signed the petition?
Almost 40,000.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't understand.
Biggest consultation ever. Biggest
city's
turnout for
Yeah.
consult. Probably more people for that than voted for
And
mayor.
I think that's going to shut the mountain off from a bigger chunk of the population.
You know what
Absolutely.
bothers me to that point? That kind of attitude that she had of, thanks for coming and we're really not interested in your opinion.
Yeah, we don't want to hear you.
I heard Luc Rabouin, who is now, of course, running for Projet Montreal, say just the other day he wants to see a shuttle on the mountain. And I thought to myself,
Space shuttle?
we have a bus.
Yeah,
It's called
they're
the
called
11,
buses.
right? The
Yeah,
7-Eleven.
yeah, right.
It's already there. What do you need a shuttle for?
Yeah.
And his answer at the end was, no shuttle, no mountain. In other words, if we don't get a shuttle, I'm going
Yeah.
to close the mountain altogether.
And that's
that attitude.
That's the thing I'm talking about. There's an arrogance and a condescension about you just don't understand the
Yeah.
new ways of the world. That's really, really aggravating. And I don't know. What I really hope the problem is, and it's everybody's fault, is the low turnout in civic elections.
Yeah. Yep.
We always say maybe that changes this time. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe
we
it
said,
does.
how many?
I'm
We've
not
said
sure.
that for years. and
20%,
years and years.
25%, it's like ludicrous.
Yeah.
But who does vote are the people in the areas that they court the most.
I tell you one thing I do think. I think these issues do become what they call bread and butter issues in this election.
Yeah.
So that, I think, in and of itself, that's a good thing.
You know, I was driving down Sherbrooke last week, and I
You
thought,
do a lot of driving down Sherbrooke.
yeah, I'm on Sherbrooke a lot lately, and I thought to myself, oh, I know what I'll cut up Royal, and I'll go to, you know, I wanted to cut up Royal to go to Monkland.
Veteran mistake.
No, you're not doing that anymore, because when you go to make the right turn onto Royal, they've set up a nice little Muskoka chair picnic table affair so that you can't turn right, and so it literally is 100 feet of street that they turned into, I don't know, a rest area, a picnic area, whatever it is, in the heart of
What
the
do they
city.
call this? They call these traffic calming
Yeah,
measures?
traffic
Is that what that
calming
is?
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not calming. Ask Aaron.
Traffic
Yeah.
angering, not
Yeah.
traffic calming.
He does not get
Okay.
calm in these situations.
yeah.
Well, no, and to what end? You know, there's lots of places in NDG for people to go into a park or sit on a bench,
Yeah.
or like, to what end? What was the point of that? I think the mayor of the borough thought, yeah, it's, you know, I think it's ideologically based. That's what I
Yeah.
think.
Look, we'll move off this. I just
Yeah,
think
yeah.
this idea that the city has of let's make motorists as angry and frustrated as we possibly can. I love this theory because the longer that goes on and the more you have it happening to you, the less likely it is you'll want to keep your car. You'll give up your car
Yes,
and you'll use public
but no,
transit. That's
but-
the theory.
And you know what? It's not just making our motorists angry. It's the functionality of a metropolis. I live in Saint Adele. I don't expect that. You know, I live up there because I know there's lack of traffic and more trees and everything else. When I come to Montreal, I don't expect there to be a picnic table on McGill College. I expect there to be a busy, bustling metropolis, and part of that are trucks and cars.
And let me just say, as a seasoned pedestrian,
Yes, you
it's
are.
not very much like I don't even use a car anymore in the city if I could possibly almost never.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, walking in the city. Try walking downtown. You'll slip into a dump site somewhere. I mean, you're just as detoured as you are on a bike or in a car. And sidewalks are everything is a mess.
Yeah, and I think it's not just, it's not just griping. It's not just anecdotal. If you're downtown, you see it. You just see it everywhere. You see someone has. When I'm downtown in Montreal, I get the feeling that someone has taken their eye off the ball.
So let me move on and talk about a story that actually just came up a day or two ago, and that's the provincial government's idea, based on a new study, that they're going to now introduce a bill this fall, only in a few weeks from now, when the National Assembly resumes, to ban public prayer in public. And I asked this actually on my show the other day, and there's opinion both ways here. People say, yeah, good, yeah. Now, we don't have details, so we don't know what this is going to mean, but I think it's pretty clear. When we had incidents like we had not that long ago, downtown Montreal, a group of Muslim men putting out their prayer mats on a street in the middle of the day, blocking traffic and taking over the street, and the police who were there basically just watching. So I asked the question, do we really need to ban public prayer, or do we need to actually have police in the city, and maybe the mayor give them that directive, to enforce a law that already exists? You're not allowed to sit in the middle of a street and tie it up, regardless of who you are. If you and I decided to go sit in the middle of René Lévesque right now, we'd be there 2 minutes before we were taken off the street.
Yeah.
So the police, for whatever reason, and I'm guessing it's at the direction of the mayor, maybe it's not, I don't know, refuse to do anything about this. So the question becomes, is this a good idea, a bad idea, or is it simply a matter of enforcing the laws we already have with respect to public protest and noise complaints and whatever?
But that's ridiculous. I mean, the fact of the matter, very few people are sitting in the middle of the street praying. I mean, they're going after people in parks. They're going does that really bother you if someone's in a corner in a park on a prayer mat? I mean, really, does it bother?
I don't think that's what it is. I think they would stop the kind of thing that they saw on a downtown street.
Yes, but how
because
often
the longer
do you see
tolerate
that,
this, the more chance
But
they'll
how
keep
often
doing
does that
this.
occur? People sitting in the middle of a street blocking traffic and praying. I've never seen that.
It happened 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, but I'm saying that's one incident.
But what I'm saying is, if it's one incident and isn't enforced, it just simply invites you to keep doing this over and over again.
But isn't this a ploy on the part of the CAQ, basically, to try to get reelected, to reach out to their base and say, look what's happening here, we're going to crack down, non-secular. I mean,
that's fair.
It's basically...
That's fair, but there obviously, I think, if you look at what's been going on in Toronto and in Montreal, there's a political overtone to it. The politicians are afraid because of the current what's the
climate?
Yeah, the current climate and the current crisis. That politicians are afraid to step on toes. That's the way it looks to me, because
in Quebec.
What happened? Well, what happened to getting a permit? I mean, remember that 5 years ago? During the Maple Spring, when the students were shutting everything down, it got to a point where the premier and the mayor said, we can't have this. You can't shut down the city. But now in Toronto and in Montreal, at least on the weekends, that's what's happening. And I think there's a political climate around that makes politicians very, very nervous. And to your point, if you are, if you and I took a blanket out here on the carry and flopped it, down at the corner just outside of Snowden Deli here, it wouldn't be long before the police would, haul our asses away.
Yeah.
And I think that's what should happen, just from a practicality point of view. But now that practicality is now clouded by the politics that seems to make politicians nervous about offending different
absolutely.
Communities.
Which does kind of beg the question, that is that part of the reason why something like this has now been talked about openly?
Yeah.
And they're going to say, we're going to introduce a bill, because that basically gives police the authority, once this becomes law, to just basically say, you can't stay here.
I've got no I have a respect for everyone's religion. I'm a lapsed Catholic, and I haven't been to church in a very long time, but I have a a deep respect for people that have faith. Doesn't matter who you pray to or what religion you follow. But, in a society, in a civilized society, there are temples and there are mosques and there are synagogues, and certainly in Quebec there are plenty of churches. And, if you want to practice your faith, I don't understand.
Plenty of places to go.
Yeah, and, can you stop and say a quiet prayer in public? Sure, why not? Can you stop and say a prayer at the corner of St. Catherine and McGill College? I don't think that should be allowed.
So, you've moved back to the province just in time for talk. PQ's looking really good in the polls and all the rest, and now there's talk that the leader says, well, his promise is to hold a referendum.
Yeah, of course.
Aren't you glad you're back?
What was really great was, didn't you think Lucien Bouchard saying, hey, don't do that. Don't have a referendum.
He kind of said, you have a chance to win, don't screw it up.
Oh, okay.
Right?
All right.
And then today, today,
Yeah.
PK or PSPP said thanks, but no thanks. Appreciate the advice. We'll do what we want to do.
Listen, it's the old la plus ça change. My first election was 1976, and we were talking about this. I was 18 years old. I'm 67, and it's another election, and we're talking about this.
1980.
And I think what happens in Quebec, what happens in Quebec, that's enough of those guys, let's give it to those guys. That's enough of those guys, let's give it to these guys. And I think a lot of people, folks who voted Bloc Québécois and Parti Québécois, those are people who are sending a message and are fed up. And in this ever-increasing, complicated, crazy, nutty world we now live in, which gets increasingly more and more complicated, I think the idea of a referendum is nuts, and I don't think there's any appetite. There might be a minority of an appetite to try separation, but does Quebec want to go on its own in this climate?
Hey.
Does Quebec want to go up against, Donald Trump and tariffs and Europe and all the other chaos that reigns? I think Quebecers are smarter than that.
Your former home base in Alberta, they might separate first.
Yeah, but that's another thing. Having lived in Alberta, that's another thing that, especially today, with media being basically clickbait people, that gets all the attention. But that's a minority of people in Alberta. It really is.
So last thing I want to touch on is the story that was in the news last week, kind of a post-tariff story. The SAQ has $27 million of American booze that it pulled off the shelves 6 months ago. And then last Friday, Mark Carney came out and said, we're dropping all retaliatory tariffs, hope this will help us work out a deal. I thought at that point, because the SAQ said, wait a sec, we have $300,000 of alcohol now that's going to go bad. So we're going to dump it.
Yeah.
When they said dump it, everybody was, dump it?
Yeah.
I'll take it. So then they decided, okay, we'll make it available to organizations, groups, hotel, schools, etc. I thought that was a great idea.
Yes.
But it does beg the question, well, wait a sec, what happens to the other $26.5 million that you have? Why wouldn't you put it back on the shelves now if we're trying to show the U.S., as the Prime Minister said, that, you know what, we're not going to push back, we'll leave things alone. It hasn't happened here. Doug Ford said it's not going to happen in Ontario, and I'm wondering why.
When does booze go bad? I was very intrigued by all of this.
Well, they say wine goes bad.
Really?
Boxed beverages
some people are
bad.
holding on to bottles 40, 50 years. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I mean, what goes bad?
Cheap wine goes bad.
Yeah, boxed wine.
And there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
So,
but I thought that was madness because, I tweeted that out and people came at me like, you don't have your elbows up and what's wrong with you? It's American. And like politics and Trump colors everything, And I thought to myself, could we just be pragmatic for a second? Like I had visions of it being like scenes from Prohibition where the cops were pouring the bottles down the sewer. And that's our tax money. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
Don't do that.
Well, that's the question. Who are we hurting?
Yeah, who are we hurting?
We already spent the money. That's our money, and now we're just going to give it away.
I get it. We got our elbows up and everything else, but let's, like you say, hotels, hotel schools, whatever it is, it's like when you're moving, you're trying not to throw away things that other people could use. Use your head.
We've got this 50-year-old bottle of scotch here. It's like past due, right? Not.
Yeah.
Well, the good news is your scotch, your gin, your vodka, none of that goes bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's one night years ago, a friend of mine was at the house, and I woke up in the morning and he said, "I hope you don't mind. I opened one of your bottles of wine that was old." And drank it at 2 in the
How
morning.
quick was he out of your house?
Yeah, I said, yeah.
All right, we're out of time. Hey, it's great to have you
Hey,
back.
thanks for having
Yeah,
me, guys.
great.
I miss griping with
Yeah,
you
we
guys.
should do
This
this
is
again.
fun.
We'll,
Yeah.
we'll do it again
Yeah.
and
All
again.
right. Thank you.
That's
Thank
going to
you,
wrap up
fellas.
this edition of the Corner Booth Podcast from the Snowden Deli. We'll see you again soon.